Welcome to today's training on suspended loads. Suspended loads are a hazard in our workplace. If you stay aware and pay attention to this training, you could avoid many potentially serious injuries at work from suspended loads. Today's training aims to provide you with some tools and to familiarize you with how to act around suspended loads so everyone goes home at the end of the day. What is a suspended load? A suspended load is anything lifted off the ground and suspended in the air. It can be anything from a length of pipe, sheet steel, a testing weight, or construction materials. If it is hanging from either an overhead crane or a forklift, it is a suspended load and must be treated with the appropriate precautions. The total load consists of everything suspended below the hook, lifting device, or forks. Suspended loads can become dangerous quite quickly if the operator loses control of the load or the equipment supporting it fails. It then becomes an uncontrolled load, and the consequences of an uncontrolled load can be disastrous. Some estimates put the rate of injury at 1 person every 10 minutes, due to struck-by hazards. An overhead load may seem secure, while it is in motion, but circumstances can change in an instant. The zone below a suspended load, where it would fall if it became uncontrolled, is known as the fall zone. Suspended loads are a common sight at AGI locations around the world. Overhead cranes, hoists, and forklifts are used to move heavy and bulky loads of materials or items from one location on the floor to another. When these loads hang from a hook, a lifting device, or from the forks of a forklift, they have become a suspended load and should be treated with caution and respect. Suspended loads are responsible for 3 main injury types: struck by, caught under or between, and pinch points. Knowing the hazards that a suspended load represents can help you avoid them. A struck-by injury occurs when you are hit by the suspended load. If the load was light, it would not need mechanical aids to lift and move it. Being hit by a very heavy load can be very hazardous. Caught under or between hazards involve you being under the load and being caught under it as it lowers or falls. This would be extremely hazardous for your health. It is never a good idea to be under a suspended load, and our rules forbid it. You could also find yourself sandwiched between the heavy load and a wall, gate, or piece of equipment. Again, this is a very hazardous place to be and should be avoided at all costs. Lastly, a suspended load represents a pinch point where your hand or a limb could get caught between the load and something else. This, as with the other hazards, is very dangerous, and we do not want you putting any part of your body between a load and an object. Here at AGI, we have a few simple rules to help you avoid these hazards. First, no body parts are allowed under any object that is suspended. This means you cannot stick your hands, legs, or walk through an area under a suspended load. You are not allowed in this fall zone under the object for any reason. You also may not perform any work on a suspended load. If you see something that needs to be done after the load is lifted in the air, inform the operator, and the load will be lowered back to the ground, where any necessary work can be performed. Any object that needs to be worked on must either be resting on the floor or in an engineered fixture designed to support the load while it is being worked on. It is important that we never touch a suspended load with our hands. There are a number of solutions we can use to handle a suspended load without ever having to touch it. We can use magnetic handles that attach to the load to help move it while suspended. There are sling sticks that can be used to grip the chains or slings used to rig the load. There is also always the use of a tag line that can help you keep a suspended load under control. If a load looks as though it is about to go out of control, it starts shifting or spinning outside of the operator's control, then we abandon it. If a load goes out of control, move away from it and clear any personnel out of the area until it falls back under our control. An uncontrolled load is an unsafe load. If a load falls, get away from it. Clear the area as fast as you can, and get out of the fall path of any falling load. At this point, it is uncontrolled and dangerous. Just get away. There is no set rule regarding how far of a distance you must keep between a suspended load and workers, but we suggest staying at least 10 feet away from a suspended load. Personnel and equipment should always stay 10 feet or more away from the fall zone if possible, while the load is suspended. Do not enter the fall zone under any circumstances. It is not permitted to ever stand or work under a suspended load. Our operators are qualified to operate our overhead cranes, hoists, and forklifts. If you are not a qualified and trained operator, do not attempt to operate the equipment. It requires special certifications and training to be able to safely operate the equipment used to suspend loads. It also requires training in how to rig the loads so they do not fall. If you have not been properly trained, get some help. Do not attempt to perform the work on your own. It will be necessary sometimes for an operator to travel with a suspended load. Once the load is in motion, we run the risk of it becoming uncontrolled, so there are some best practices we use when moving loads. First, never move a suspended load over people or equipment. Do not put objects in the fall zone if it can be avoided. Pre-plan your path and make sure it is as clear as possible before beginning transmission of the load. Carry the load as close to the ground as possible to minimize the amount of time a load can be uncontrolled if it falls. Always use a spotter along your path of travel, or if you are suspending a load in a confined space. Set barricades along your path of travel so that nobody can stray into the fall zone of your suspended load. If possible, avoid traveling altogether. Before you rig a load to lift it, you should know some information about our rigging gear. Every piece of rigging is marked with its capacity. You should be properly trained before using any piece of rigging. Once trained, you can use the capacity indicators to decide which rigging is appropriate for the load you are lifting. Take care of your rigging, and it will take care of you. Our rigging requires an annual inspection to ensure it is in good condition and capable of handling the loads we will put them under. We also require a visual inspection of all rigging material before being used. Immediately report any damaged rigging to your supervisor and take it out of service so nobody else will mistakenly use it. We have some devices we use to help us control loads. Sling sticks are used to grab onto chains and rigging and guide a load while it is suspended, or to keep it under control. We also use magnetic handles. We affix these to the sides of loads, so we do not have to touch the actual suspended load, and it keeps us clear of the fall zone. We use load pullers to move a heavy load, once suspended across the floor. Lastly, we can always use tag lines to keep us clear of the fall zone. Today, we covered the hazards of suspended loads. We talked about the importance of keeping the fall zone clear, what kinds of hazards a suspended load represents, and some tools and techniques we can use to keep the fall zone clear. Lastly, remember that we do not allow our employees to operate our lifting equipment unless properly trained and authorized to do so. Always seek out help if you have not been trained to do something. Have a safe day.